Right on. So my goal would be to start out with just a little bit of an overview. We'll walk through what the fundamentals are and a little bit of how they relate to our existing body movements and board performances. So we'll do a little refresh there, and then get into specifically to how they work as a tool for movement analysis, which is where I think they're really a, a very useful tool. They start to put things into relationship, body movements, board performances, how they interrelate, and I think that's really where they start to become a little more useful. Yeah, Donnie, I don't think anyone, I couldn't repeat them verbatim word for word, and no one really expects anyone to. We wrote them in a language that puts them into relationship with, makes them very similar across the other discipline fundamentals, and that was the goal there, is for them to be similar in wording, but recognizing that in terms of vernacular and how we use them, I'm going to talk about moving pressure along the length of the snowboard, not directing pressure, like, yeah, the way we use them versus the way they're written is a little bit different. Cool, we got 22 on, right on. We'll go ahead and jump in. Thank you guys for joining. My name's Chris Rogers. I'm an instructor and trainer at Vail Mountain. I'm an examiner in the Rocky Mountain region, and I'm on the AASI national team and on a bunch of different task forces and groups. I am from Alaska originally, moved to Steamboat Springs in 2004 and started teaching there, and taught in Steamboat for a number of years. Went on to do some marketing and membership down in communication down in Denver. I worked for the national office for a couple of years, and then ended up back up in the mountains, moved to Vail. And for the last 5 years, I was the manager of training and quality at Vail Mountain, kind of running the whole training program there. And then this season, stepped back into instruction and training, and just back to the full-time frontline gig, which has been just awesome. I had a great season. I know it's been rough having it cut short, especially as it's snowing hard here in Avon right now. But I had such a great season, and it's been really fun for me getting to clinic maybe a little wider audience than we would normally get to on snow, getting a little more comfortable with these webinars, and sharing some information. I'm hoping there's some of this that we continue through into the next season, that there's opportunities for us to chat and continue conversations and training, even when we're off snow. I'm looking to do some of these, maybe do a level 2 cert kickoff and a level 3 cert kickoff. That's bring all your questions as you're getting ready for cert. Some different topics we might get into over the next couple of months, and see how it all goes. But the focus for this one is to really specifically get into the snowboard fundamentals and how they work for movement analysis. The way I tend to run these is if you've got a question, feel free to use the raise your hand tool that's built in, or throw a question in the chat, and we'll ideally, everyone kind of stays muted until you're speaking. It keeps things moving pretty well. I think we're all getting a little bit more comfortable with this format and kind of best practices way to do things. But please do interrupt, have questions, raise your hand, and we'll jump around and get to questions for sure. I'm going to switch over to the PowerPoint presentation, and I kind of jump back and forth a little bit. The PowerPoint's really just there as we go through the fundamentals, and then I'm going to keep it on half the screen and pull up videos, and we'll actually start using them watching some riders. So start out with, this is just to review the fundamentals here. And again, the goal with these fundamentals is not to replace where we've been before. So the learning connection model was rolled out by the teams in Ushuaia at the 2015 Interski, and this idea that this is what makes a great instructor: technical skills, teaching skills, and people skills. So what we're going to be talking about today really lies within this technical skills corner, the fundamentals of snowboarding, and it's built upon the concept of body movements and board performances. So these are the 6 snowboard fundamentals, and they are written very similar. The first 5 are almost identical to the alpine fundamentals. So control the relationship of the center of mass to the base of support to direct pressure along the length of the board. So this is talking about moving pressure along the length of the snowboard, right? We can do that by moving our center of mass, or by moving the snowboard underneath a stable center of mass, right? So think about like that shuffle movement that we make on our snowboard, or about moving the center of mass, driving through that front ankle, knee, and hip flexion, driving our center of mass forward, or through that right ankle, knee, hip flexion, driving our center mass towards the tail of the snowboard. So looking at this movement, the relationship of the center mass to the base of the support, right? Make sense there? So next fundamental, looking at controlling the relationship of the center mass to the base of the support to direct pressure along the width of the snowboard. So now we're not talking about tilting the snowboard in this fundamental. We're talking about the ability to move our weight over the snowboard. So we can move pressure over the heel side edge or move pressure over the toe side edge without affecting tilt. And this is the reason that we talk about these as two separate fundamentals. That concept of tilt we'll get into. This fundamental is really specifically about moving pressure. And if you think about the combinations of fundamental 1 and 2 here, moving weight over the nose of the snowboard and then maybe over the heel side edge, getting into a butter maneuver, our ability to manipulate pressure anywhere on the snowboard comes from fundamental 1 and 2. So that movement all over and across the snowboard. Huckdahl. This is, what is this? This is Tech Rider. Techrider. They're a Norwegian company, actually. This is the Terje Hawkinson Pro model. And they came out like years ago. They had them at SIA, and I don't know if they ever went on sale, but you definitely can find them on eBay. These ones are sweet because they're all silicone, so they actually flex and move. They've got like a skeletal structure inside. The knee joint is actually a true hinge. I thought about cutting the pants off so you could actually see them. It's like an actual knee joint, and the elbow is the same way. So the elbows will only bend along the hinge joint. Same with the knees. And when you look at like a steering movement of the front knee, the knee doesn't rotate. Just like our human body, the femur rotates within the hip socket. These guys are awesome. I really wish they were more available. Our next fundamental here, control the magnitude of pressure created through the board surface interaction. This one is, again, pretty much word for word straight out of the alpine side of things, although we changed the wording a bit, obviously board instead of ski, but specifically that surface interaction, not just talking about snow, talking about boxes, trees, jibs, whatever, that we're constantly controlling that pressure. It's not just our ability to move vertically, but also the snow moving underneath us, right? So we're controlling that magnitude of pressure. So this covers down-awaiting movement patterns. It covers coming up and over. It covers retraction, pulling the snowboard to us. It covers if you're going over a roller in a border cross track, the different ways you could approach that, either coming in low, extending and creating some energy out of that, or kind of pre-ollieing and trying to roll over it like a border cross rider would, or maybe even trying to pump and generate speed through that. So all of those concepts of vertical pressure management are covered in this fundamental of controlling the magnitude of pressure. Our next one, control the board's pivot through flex, extension, and rotation of the body. So this is, again, where things are a little bit different. Because of our biomechanics on a snowboard, we can create pivot and tilt. Well, more so, we can create pivot through flex, extension, and rotation, right? So pivot is rotation is the obvious way to create pivot. If we rotate our upper body, the snowboard is going to want to pivot underneath us, right? So this movement of pivot through rotation, that one makes a lot of sense. But as we get into the higher level concepts of that, or we start talking about twist, we can create pivot in the snowboard through flex and extension, right? If I extend my back leg out, that's going to make the board pivot as well as that upper body rotation. So we talk about how we can create pivot through flex, extension, and rotation of the body. Whereas in the alpine fundamentals, it's a lot more specific, right? If you flex and extend along the length of the ski, if you close your ankle joint, that moves your center mass over the ski, and it doesn't so much create pivot the way it does in a snowboard. So we kind of distinguish that as a difference. Control the board's tilt through a combination of inclination and angulation. So now we're getting into that concept of tilt. And again, this could come through inclination or inclining into the hill with a kind of isometrically flexed ankle joint, right? We're not flexing into it. We are keeping our ankle joint at 90 degrees and tilting our entire body, or inclining our entire body. And that creates tilt. We could also create tilt through extending our ankles, flexing our knees and getting into that Michael Jackson position, right? So that concept that inclination and angulation are separate topics. Angulation is specifically talking about flexing our joints to maintain balance with tilt, whereas inclination is talking about that overall angle of the human body to the snow. So this side is inclination as we tip without get as tall as possible. As we tip, that would be more, this would be an inclined position with not much angulation. Whereas if we're flexed in that toe side turn, this would be inclination with angulation. Same thing, I could have very low inclination and angulation, or I could have very low inclination with some angulation in that kind of Michael Jackson maneuver. So yeah, that concept of tilt being controlled through that inclination and angulation. Yeah, yeah, Chandler. When Doug used that mini board for the visual demos, that was really cool. He was using the Snowboard Addiction board. Control torsional flex of the board using flex, extension, and rotation of the body. So this is that sixth fundamental, the one we added in because we felt like twist is a pretty key part of what we do on a snowboard. So on a ski, you know, if you through terrain have a ski on edge, there's going to be some torsional flexion of that ski, right? As the contact point at the nose of the ski rolls over something, it might twist the ski. Whereas we talk about active twist, right? We can intentionally twist that snowboard through flex, extension, and rotation. And again, that rotation coming from the knee, if we rotate that femur in the hip socket, we can create some twist there. But also talking about flex and extension, ankle, knee, hip, we can create that twist in the snowboard. I wish this board was a little bit softer, it'd be easier to show that. So those 6 fundamentals, the goal there is to put the body movement in relationship with the board performance. So the board performances, the body movements, they're still there. They are the building blocks of the fundamentals. The fundamentals put them into relationship with each other and I think really help explain pressure. Pressure was always a sticking point for people. We had, it's a bigger concept than tilt, twist, and pivot. Those are things the snowboard can do kind of on planes, whereas that concept of pressure is much bigger. It talks about vertical pressure, it talks about fore and aft pressure, and it talks about pressure along the width of the snowboard. So the fundamentals let us really expand those thoughts and make it clear that all 3 of those elements of pressure are incredibly important to what we do. Any questions on the overall makeup of the 6 fundamentals, how they apply to snowboarding, kind of in general questions there before we move into movement analysis? No, everyone's good. Cool. So with that in mind, jump into some movement analysis. So what I think is awesome about these fundamentals is they create a lens through which to look. So if pull them right back up here. So the thing with fundamentals is that they are always true. These 6 elements, there are 6 fundamentals here, are always true. You are always doing all of these things. If the snowboard's flat, you are controlling the board's tilt. If the snowboard is in a carved turn, you are controlling the board's pivot by not pivoting, right? If you are riding a flat base across a box, you are controlling the relationship of your center of mass across the width of the snowboard, across the length of the snowboard, and vertically. All of these things are happening all the time. And that's why when you see a student hit a box for the first time and their snowboard starts to turn, or they go off a jump and their shoulders are open and in the air, the board turns sideways with them in the air, right? All of these things are always present. And that wording of them is so specific because we are controlling the board's tilt by not tilting the snowboard. We are controlling torsional flex by torsionally flexing the snowboard or by not torsionally flexing the snowboard. So these six things are always present, always present. The key with using them is looking at them as a lens through which to address deficiencies, things that are going well, areas that are going to be helpful to give feedback. So one of the ones I go to as a really good demonstration is an ollie. A good ollie, we talk about moving aft on the snowboard, starting to flex the snowboard, moving vertically on the snowboard and popping off the tail, retracting in the air and landing flat, right? Pretty common definition of an ollie. So the two key movements that come out in the fundamentals there are managing pressure along the length of the snowboard and managing pressure vertically, magnitude of pressure, right? Are we controlling the board's pivot through flex extension and rotation of the body? Absolutely. And if somebody does an ollie and they open their shoulders, you're going to see that board start to turn and they're going to land a little bit crooked, right? Are we managing the board's tilt through a combination of inclination and angulation? Absolutely. If they are hunched over and pop off the tail, they might land on their knees, right? They might fall over their toe side edge. But in a general sense, if we're watching an ollie, the two things we're going to see issues with are moving pressure over the tail of the snowboard and moving pressure vertically. If they are successfully doing an ollie, and we want to take that to a stronger ollie, looking at those two areas are probably where you're going to give feedback. So I think about sitting in the chair at the optometrists, and they're like, is lens 1 better? Click, click, or lens 2? Now lens 2 or lens 3, right? And they're constantly swapping back and forth and asking you which lens makes your eyes clearer. That's how I use the fundamentals. So these 6 fundamentals are 6 different lenses through which to watch any movement, anything that's going on a snowboard, and say, what's the most effective way for me to give someone feedback about this? So we're going to pull up a video. Full desktop. Go. Pull this over to the side. All right, so we're going to watch this video here. And we'll just play through that again. We'll play through it one more time. I know it can be a little bit choppy watching these, so I like to give a couple of views. All right, so watching that video, what do you guys see as, well, I mean, first, is that a successful or unsuccessful 360? Check here. So I think we can all agree that that rider is able to do a 360, right? They're doing a flatland 360 there. They're getting it all the way around and able to complete that 360. Now, if we want to take that to a next level, we can look at through our 6 fundamentals and, you know, looking at them as lenses, controlling the relationship of the center mass to direct pressure along the length of the snowboard. Probably not super effective piece to give feedback around. Obviously, like, they're able to do the task, and they are managing their center mass relative to the base of support, but it's probably not the most effective lens to give feedback through. Same for the second one. They are shifting their weight over their toe side and heel side edge. They are moving pressure along the width of the snowboard, and we could give them feedback around that, but again, probably not the most effective place to give feedback. Magnitude of pressure. Not seeing a ton of vertical movement in here. And it's certainly an area we could go look at getting a little bit taller, a little bit smaller, using a little bit more flex and extension. Controlling the board's pivot through flex, extension, rotation of the body. Here's one that's going to be a pretty large lens, right? This one is one that would make a pretty big effect. If we want to talk about more rotation, flex and extension to create pivot, that's one way we could make this stronger. Control the board's tilt through a combination of inclination and angulation. Probably not super applicable for using feedback here. Control torsional flex of the snowboard using flex, extension, and rotation of the body. This one's going to be a key piece again for taking these to making them a little bit more smooth. As I watch this rider, I don't see a ton of twists along that snowboard, right? You can see a little bit of pressure movement over that, but not a big use of flex and extension, kind of independent flex and extension through ankles, knees, and hips to create some twist, and not a lot of upper lower body separation or use of rotation to bring that around. It's pretty much just using pressure on the edge. So my take on watching this and using the fundamentals is that we would focus on controlling the board's pivot through flex, extension, and rotation of the body, talking about rotary movements of either the upper body to kind of open up and steer into it, using that front ankle and knee, rotating the femur and that lead knee into it to create some additional pivot, and or focus on controlling torsional flex of the board using flex, extension, rotation of the body, right? We could twist the snowboard to create a little bit faster rotation, a little bit more smooth rotation going into that. Does that make sense? Seeing head nods. Cool. Right on. So I've got a couple more videos we'll roll through and some different places where we can really highlight this and look at the different ways this applies. And then if other people, like if any of you would like to take a stab at working through one of these, we'll definitely have that opportunity as well. We've got a little over half an hour to kind of play with these in different videos. So if start thinking now, if you'd like to jump on and to watch one of these videos and throw out some ideas about how the fundamentals apply, start thinking about if you want to jump on and do that. And I'm just going to roll through a couple more of these as we go now. Take a quick screenshot here too. Cool. And like I said, at any point you have questions or other questions you want to ask, just feel free to throw those comments or questions into the chat as we go along, or raise your hand. In the raise hand tool. I don't always have the screen up, so I can't ever, if you've got your hand up, I don't necessarily see it. I'll jump right back to share screen here. Oops. There's this little checkbox that helps optimize for video. Let's try to grab that one. All right. All right, so again, sticking with simple movements, kind of in that level 1 zone. Got a tail press here.
Eyes up, good, yes. That was money. That was
Jonathan Hirschberger, examiner
up,
here in
good,
Rocky.
yes.
Shot
That
this
was
one.
money. That was eyes up, good, yeah.
So again, we've got a pretty successful maneuver here. But one of the things I see here that I'd want to work on if this was a student I was working with would be maintaining that pressure a little bit longer, right? She just barely gets into it and then comes right out of it and rides away. So we've got a successful maneuver here, and looking at a tail press through the lens of the fundamentals. Big one here is going to be controlling our pressure along the length of the snowboard, as well as controlling the magnitude of pressure vertically. Um, we could look at if we were seeing a turn start to happen, they might have some pressure over the toe side edge. Probably not getting into tilt at all as in a good tail press as a place to go, but certainly looking at that pressure across the snowboard. That's one of the areas that we see common issues with is too much pressure over heel side or toe side, and your tail press or nose press is going to start to drift or even start to pivot, right? But in this tail press, look at pretty straight track. You can look off the tail of the snowboard. You can see that there's pressure flat on the snowboard. We're not seeing like a big heel side edge or a big toe side edge. So it kind of knocks those fundamentals out as primary lenses. But certainly using that concept of lenses, controlling the relationship along the length of the snowboard and controlling pressure vertically. So this is where we see that concept of the yawning alligator, right? And she's got a pretty strong nose press here, not so much a yawning alligator, but does come back down pretty quickly. And that comes through this movement, this vertical movement she makes right here. As she makes that strong vertical movement of the upper body, notice her knee is already pretty flexed, but she drops her upper body down in as well. She flexes through the lower spine and drops her shoulders into that over that tail as well. And that's where that vertical movement comes from that helps her create a little bit more of a tail press there, right? She flexes the snowboard a little bit more, managing that pressure. So if we could slow down that movement and focus on flexing the rear ankle, knee, and hip to get there as well, she would likely be able to hold that a little bit longer. I think in terms of pressure along the length of the snowboard, we're seeing this tail press. It indicates to me that she's got her pressure over that back foot far enough to keep the nose off the snowboard. So the fundamental I would want to focus on here would be controlling that magnitude of pressure. She's generating a little bit too much pressure. She can't hold it that long and has to stand back up and drop out of it. Whereas with a little bit slower movement into it, I think we'd be able to see her hold that a little bit longer. Jump over the next video. Looking at some turns. Watch this again. Oh, that was it. One more time here. Right on. So jumping into this rider, and I see there's some chat about the previous rider. We'll go back to that one. I didn't see that until after I started this video. But let's continue on with this video, and then we can go back to that tail press as well. What do you guys see here in terms of those fundamentals? Where do we think, we can throw it in chat here. Where do we think we see opportunities for this rider? If anyone wants to unmute, or if anyone wants to throw chat in, throw comments in the chat. Chandler says the back leg, using that back leg primarily. The celebration hands, yes, the celebration hands are awesome. Growth and flex and extension, controlling tilt through inclination and angulation. She's too static, she doesn't shift forward. Inclination, angulation. But you guys see it just by rolling through that list of fundamentals. We can start to narrow down some options here. And if we look at her controlling her relationship along of the center mass along the base of support to direct pressure along the length of the snowboard, we can talk about fore and aft there, right? So there's an opportunity there through pressure along the length of the snowboard. Control relationship of center mass to base of support to direct pressure along the width of the snowboard. Probably not a key lens there, right? She is completing her turns. She's got weight over the edges that they need to be. So probably not going to talk a lot about managing pressure along the width of the board. Talking about vertical movement, we could get a little bit more into flex and extension. As you guys said, she's a little bit static there. So getting a little bit taller to initiate the turn, flexing down, getting a little bit lower through the body of the turn could be a route to go. Controlling pivot through flex, extension, rotation of the body. And this is where I think things start to get really cool because of the interaction between the fundamentals, right? So none of these fundamentals are in a silo. They're all happening all the time. And so if we want to talk about creating pivot with her, what's the issue that's going to prevent her from working on pivot? Somebody said it in here earlier. Using that back leg, right? She's got pressure over the tail of the snowboard. We can see in that stance that she's a little bit aft. So if we want to focus on pivot, we're also going to have to work on getting her weight forward so that the snowboard can pivot through the snow, right? As long as she's got weight on that tail, I'll pull that video back up. As long as she's got weight on the tail, she's going to have a really hard time we can pause it here and look at her alignment relative to the slope. I would say if we go back to reference alignments, and again, the fundamentals don't replace any of our other tools, right? It's just a new way to organize and look at that material. So if we look at those hips in terms of perpendicular to the snow or parallel to the snow, I think she's a little bit aft here. You can see that back knee's maybe a little bit more flexed than the front knee. And right here is where you really see that shoulder has fully come out of alignment with the train. She's starting to try to turn using that shoulder instead of her front knee. That back knee's got a little bit more weight on it. That's going to make it really hard to work on pivot. So that relationship between the fundamentals starts to come into play. So I would want to focus on getting her a little bit more fore on the snowboard here, right? She's, yeah, absolutely. Brandon said she's leading with the hip. I want to get that front knee involved a little bit more, get those shoulders. She's kind of living in the past over here. That front shoulder out in front of the snowboard and lead into the future. And because of that, it'd be really hard to work on pivot. So you really see it right here. Right, she gets over the edge. She's back in control. She's pretty happy through here. And as we go to that heel side, again, you can see her slowing down a little bit, getting a little more tentative, not quite ready to put the snowboard down the hill. And as we get down the hill here, again, you can see that back knee bent more than the front knee. So that aft pressure, talking about managing pressure along the length of the snowboard, we definitely want to work on getting some pressure towards the nose of the snowboard here. That's going to unlock our ability to pivot the snowboard and is going to be a building block for the rest of it. So we can start talking about prioritizing deficiencies or working on something we want to correct. Some of them, the fundamentals, have some building blocks. So if you are too aft, you're going to have a really hard time managing pivot. If you are not using flex and extension, you're going to have a really hard time unlocking twist, right? There's different elements here that build upon each other. Sorry, 1 second here. All right. So then other elements we brought up there, controlling tilt. There's absolutely an opportunity to work on controlling tilt, right? She kind of sets a really high, high edge angle, and you can see that pressure build up and create some chatter. So this is a combination of tilt and pressure management, right? Managing the magnitude, controlling the magnitude of pressure created by creating a whole bunch of tilt right there. She increases pressure to that edge, which creates that chatter, creates that slop in the snowboard, right? So this is an issue with both pressure management and with tilt management. So we know we've got that going there. Once she gets onto the edge and kind of is back in control, she's doing an okay job of managing her tilt through the kind of control and finish phase of the turn, right? Same thing we see here coming through the toe side. She sets that edge, she gets a little bit bucked right here, and then she settles back onto that edge and gets to a more appropriate tilt for that skidded turn. And then she really likes this one here. She gets down onto this little bit of a cat track that cuts across the hill. It's not quite as steep. She's able to cut through there a little bit more comfortably. Is this making sense? Is this concept of using the fundamentals as lenses to pick out kind of the low-hanging fruit? So with going from there into prescription for change, the fundamentals don't really rewrite the rest of our tools. OEP is still the way we do movement analysis, right? Make an observation, evaluate that movement pattern, prescribe something new. It's still how we do movement analysis. The fundamentals just become a better tool for evaluating and for making those observations. And as we go into working with this rider, I'm not going to be like, all right, so we're going to focus on fundamental 2, which is moving our pressure along the width of the snowboard, right? I'm not going to talk like that to the student. I'm going to talk about bending her front knee, moving her hips over the snowboard, leaning into the future, leading into this turn rather than keeping her weight in the back foot, right? It's probably what her instructor was saying all day, keeping weight on her front foot. Maybe going back to some slightly more gentle terrain and working on that initiation of the turn, moving into that control phase, managing pressure, getting our weight a little bit more forward so we can manage that pivot and control that skid a little bit more comfortably. All of those elements of how we work with the rider, still the same. We're relying on our experiences as educators and the job that we do to fill in those details of how we do MA. The fundamentals are a great tool for making these observations and prioritizing those inefficiencies, right? And I think that's the key for me and why these make sense is that concept of prioritizing deficiencies or prioritizing inefficiencies. There might be multiple elements we could give a rider feedback through, but by choosing those ones that are going to make the biggest difference in the next run for this rider, we're helping make the process better for everyone. So I'm gonna pull up another video here. Oh, if we want to go back, let's see here, go back to some comments here. Brandon said, I think she's using weight to create pressure instead of using her leg muscles to create pressure. Yeah. I don't know if we need to go all the way back and review that video, but yeah, I would agree. She's using that weight to create pressure versus moving into, for that tail press, moving into that tail press a little bit more gradually. That's another way to look at it, right? Cool. I'm going to pull up a little bit higher level video here now, getting into linking some turns in some crud. A couple more times. All right, so as we watch this rider, there's probably one or two key things that are standing out to you as you watch these. You know, we talk about in movement analysis, we talk about body down, board up, kind of the whole picture, different ways to watch this. This rider, there's a couple of specific kind of outcomes that I see. Yeah, Cody, controlling pivot through rotation, especially heel to toe side, right? That heel to toe side, we really see that counter rotation, that upper body movement into the turn, and then upper and lower body working in opposition to get across that toe side. Handler, back foot heavy, up on waiting, rider open most of the time. Yep, so some stance things you're seeing there. You guys see this pressure management issue on the heel side turn. Almost every heel side turn there. Yeah, Becky, I can pop this up. I can't keep the video full screen if I have those up. What if I do this? One second here. Let me do this. No. All right. I'm going to send you guys all this image of the 6 fundamentals all in one slide in the chat so that you guys all have them and can put them somewhere where it's not going to get in your way. Go. So that in the chat there, you can grab that image that has those 6 fundamentals laid out. That way you can have them anywhere on your screen. Cody, really inclinate on the heel side, causing a lot of tilt. Yes. So as we look at this heel side turn, so the 2 things that kind of pop out to me as I watch this video is that counter rotation initiating the toe side turn, right? Closing the shoulder as he initiates the turn, coming through, and this big movement of the upper and lower body moving in opposition to get around to the toe side turn. That one should stand out to everyone. And then as he comes across toe side into heel side, he opens up and comes across the heel side. That movement's there as well, but maybe not as pronounced. And as we come across the heel side here, watch what the snowboard's doing through this whole heel side turn, right? And then same thing here again, heel side turn. And again, heel side turn. So those 2 things absolutely stand out. As I watch this video, and if I was sitting here with a candidate going for their level 2 or level 3 and work watching this video, that's what should stand out, right? There are other things going on here. There are other things that you could work on for sure. And there's not a right answer when it comes to movement analysis, right? But those 2 movements should be 2 of the key ones that stand out. There's some aft pressure. You can look at his stance. You can look at how he's not flexing that front knee. That one stands out. You can look at this counter rotation to initiate the toe side turn. That one stands out. And you look at the pressure management through this heel side turn. This stands out, right? Jay Hutchins, that should be right above your post. That should say screenshot, click to open. Post this again. And I can just pop back up through through my share too. Share my desktop. All right. I gotcha. All right. It's popped up there now. You guys can hopefully see my whole screen again now. Show it that way. Cool. So going through those fundamentals with those three kind of primary lenses, we can look at that rotary piece here that comes in through controlling the board's pivot through flex, extension, rotation of the body. This is an area we might want to work on because the rider is initiating that turn with this massive movement of the upper body. They pivot quickly through a control phase, end up on the toe side turn in kind of the finish of the turn, and then have to absorb that pressure through their ankles. You see their upper body stays pretty static here, and their front knee is a little bit more extended, back knee is a little bit more flexed, shoulders are open, and this pressure that we see him struggle with on the heel side, he's able to absorb through that ankle flexion here through the toe side, right? It's still there, but he's able to absorb it. So this comes through because of that counter rotation. No real control phase. We go pretty much that classic L-shaped turn straight into that toe side. Comes through, a little open and aft. Front legs a little more extended, back legs a little more flexed. So here's that position. I think Chandler was mentioning in chat. Because he's a little bit aft here, he's having a really hard time skidding the snowboard. And yeah, right here, textbook picture of it. Back knees flexed, front knees extended. Shoulders are open. He's coming around from toe to heel side here. And as he gets through here, comes back into alignment briefly. And look at that knee flexion, right? So he's too inclined into the turn, managing tilt through a combination of inclination and angulation. This line here, he's kind of overcommitted, dumped his hips into that turn. And that's generating an issue with managing the magnitude of pressure created through board surface interaction. That's creating additional pressure that he's having to absorb through his knees. And then he goes right back into that toe side turn, closing the shoulder, using that rotary movement to bring the snowboard across, and then counter rotation, get around to that toe side. See, inside or outside of the turn on his heel side. I would say he's too far inside the turn on his heel side here, right? His hips are dumped down into this kind of direction of his center mass is here. You can see his shoulders are barely over that heel side edge, but by dumping his hips in, he's creating a lever here, which applies all of that pressure inside that heel side turn, and is too much for him to smoothly manage as he comes through this. Counter rotation, you get to the toe side. Again, you can see that energy right there, like that same amount of energy with managing, controlling magnitude of pressure through board surface interaction. Throws the snowboard, flex, extend of that ankle. He's able to manage it there. Comes around to the heel side. He's not able to manage it as well on the heel side because he doesn't have that ankle joint at play, right? So that kind of that repeating pattern here that we see through all of these turns. If you guys got this, this was your student, this was your first turn, which of those three areas would you want to focus on first? Which one's the low-hanging fruit? Pivot. Tony says pivot. Flex and absorb. Chandler says inclination, angulation from Becky. Brandon says flex and extension of the front ankle. Body alignment, larger turn radius. Cody says tilt and pressure on the heel side. So, and this is the key, right? And I think this is such a huge point with MA. There isn't a right answer. I'm not going to be like, oh, yep, Cody, that was right. Everyone else was wrong. Movement analysis is so much based on your teaching style and how you're going to coach a rider, right? When you start talking about a prescription for change, we're not looking for a right answer. What we're looking is that your story makes sense. The story you're telling about this rider makes sense. And as you're watching that rider, as I said, there were kind of three predominant elements that stood out to me as areas we could work on with this rider. Which of those you want to focus on, that's up to you. You're their instructor, and exactly what Tara just said, the rider's goal. You're their instructor and you're working to meet their goals. That's going to inform how you're going to work with this rider. And so, you know, I don't want anyone to walk away from this thinking there's one specific way to do this. The 6 fundamentals create a great platform, a great tool for analyzing, and you know, a great lens to look at these through. But of those three, you could choose to work on any of them, right? I personally would probably, this to me stands out as one of the primary issues is that straight front leg, that more flexed back ankle and knee, and that's going to move pressure towards the tail of the snowboard. So working on controlling pressure along the length of the snowboard, that's one I go to because I find a lot of success in helping people create pivot by getting them more centered on their snowboard. And we all know our students want to move aft as soon as they get on steeper terrain, right? Like that's one of those things we're constantly dealing with. So that's where I might go, but I don't think anyone in here is wrong in the direction they're going. And as you go into cert processes, don't think about what the examiner's thinking is right or wrong, because we're not. What we're listening to is how you're building that story. Does what you said you saw match up to what you want to work on? Did you say the biggest issue is this, and then go off on a tangent of this other thing you're going to work on that has nothing to do with what you addressed as their primary issue, right? So looking that story makes sense is the best way to look through MA. Pop up another of these. There you go. It's right where the zoom control was. Bumps off piste. Here we go. Getting into even a little bit more advanced terrain here. All right, so we're getting some like finer movements here. Play this again a couple more times. Play this one more time here. Brandon, you just have to put the camera really close to the snow and then tilt it up so it looks like it's really steep. All right, Cody says inclination and angulation on the toe side. So looking as he comes through this toe side. I did a bunch of clinics in Central Division this year, and riding areas like Afton and Buck Hill, and man, the terrain is limited for sure, but all of the smaller resorts I've ever led training at make up for their vert with people and food. Absolutely, like every small resort I've ever been to has amazing food and awesome people. Flexed at the hip on the toe side. Yeah. So Cody's talking about right here. So looking at, right, so the last point I want to make about these fundamentals is they talk a lot about the what, right? They're a really good connection of the relationship between the body movements and the board performance, but they don't talk about how, right? So it leaves it to the instructor to talk about how we're going to manage pressure vertically, or how we're going to manage pressure along the length of the snowboard. The fundamentals don't say anything about moving across the snowboard or moving the snowboard underneath you, right? That's the how. When I mean it doesn't talk about the how, it doesn't talk about how we're going to control the relationship of our center of mass to the base of the support. It doesn't talk about bending the front knee, extending the back knee, or kind of the shuffle movement in pivot. It doesn't talk about kind of the bow tie versus pivoting by flexing that front knee, right? So the fundamentals don't take away from the instructor experience and knowledge, reference alignments, our teaching cycle, movement analysis, OEP. It doesn't replace all those other things. It talks about what the relationship is between the body and the board. It doesn't say how. And so as we get to Cody's point here, we could talk about reference alignment, keeping a center mass over the snowboard. But if we look at these fundamentals, it absolutely is reflected in the fundamental of managing the board's tilt through a combination of inclination and angulation, right? That is an angle. He's dropped his hips over, his shoulders over his hips, broken at the waist, flexing through the lower spine, and dropping into the turn. So we could look there. We could look at controlling the relationship of the center mass to the base of support to direct pressure along the width of the snowboard. And those are the fundamentals. Looking at the how, we can talk about he's dropped, he's no longer in reference alignment. He's not staying stacked over that toe side turn. And sorry, I was just reading Kelly's comment there. It's not replacing the how, right? The how is where we get to the meat of good movement analysis. Got a couple other frames along here. So we see some upper and lower body separation. And I think what's key as we get into these level 3 movements is the difference between the last rider we looked at and this rider in terms of the rotary movements of the upper body and the steering movements of the lower body. You can see in this rider that those two aren't necessarily connected. This one is, right? Rotates the upper body, uses that energy to make that hop turn and get it around. So we come through this turn across on the toes and go into the heels. The shoulders are open, but that movement right here, that comes from lower body movement, back knee coming around the front knee a little bit. It's not necessarily pivot coming from the upper body, rotation coming from the upper body. Coming in here, rotates again, and then a vertical movement to unweight, bring the snowboard around, toe to heel, body opens, pivots the snowboard underneath. So we got a couple different ways that this rider is creating some turns. All of these are through extension to unweight the snowboard. So we could look at maybe getting, and so that's controlling the magnitude of pressure created through board surface interaction, right? But we could look at maybe going to a most flexed edge change movement pattern, dropping the center of mass, a down away movement pattern, or getting into some retraction. So looking at different ways of the how we control the relationship of center mass to the base of support, right? Turn shape, looking at changing the size and shape of these turns through probably through that movement pattern of getting into a more down away movement. Does that make sense that they're not replacing the how? Like there's still a lot of room within each of these fundamentals for how we actually want to improve the rider or make a change to the rider. But the fundamentals, I think, make a great lens for picking out some movements that we might want to focus on. I'll pull up one more here because we haven't done much with high edge angle. Last one. And looking at some carve turns. These are going to be switch carve turns, but focus on the carve. No worries. Thanks for joining, Tara. So for me, as I'm watching this, I'm kind of rolling through the fundamentals as a bit of a checklist. Is the rider controlling pressure along the length of the snowboard adequate to the task? Yep. Next one. Are they managing pressure along the width of the snowboard? Yep. Next one. Magnitude of pressure created through board surface interaction. I'm going to come back to that one. Controlling pivot. Yeah, for the most part, we got a little bit of a skid in the initiation of a few of these, but that's one we might want to work on. Controlling the board's tilt through a combination of inclination and angulation. That's definitely one that applies here. And controlling torsional flex, yeah, we're probably not doing a lot of that. So already, just in watching this a couple of times, I've narrowed it down to 3 of these fundamentals that I'm going to focus on. And again, watching this, and I'm going to kind of focus on those 3 as I'm watching this. You know, I would like to see a little bit more flex and extension. Magnitude of pressure, big one. Yep. There's not a lot of flex and extension going on. I totally agree, Cody. So there's an opportunity there as we want to set the edge more to really lock in that carve. That's going to help us with right here, right? You see this front knee drive, and there's a little bit of pivot there. So this pivot is an area that we're going to want to reduce that pivot. We're going to control the board's pivot by focusing on managing pressure vertically and managing tilt through inclination and angulation. So these are the 2, as I watched through this a few times, these are the 2 that I kind of boiled down to as the primary fundamentals that are going to be effective here. And those 2 go hand in hand, right? They relate very well. Right here, if our rider flexes their ankles and knees a little bit more, it's going to move their center of mass over this toe side edge a little bit more. It's going to create some more tilt through angulation, and it's going to control the magnitude of pressure by applying a little bit more. Same thing, right? As we come through here, real static, he moves laterally across the snowboard, right? He manages pressure across the snowboard pretty effectively, but he doesn't progressively flex down into the turn here, which would be his opportunity to increase that pressure on the edge, letting him carve a little bit more and putting him in a more angulated position to manage that tilt through the carve. So you can go 2 directions from there if you want to get into the tools of like cause and effect. You could go either way with this one because the rider doesn't stays mostly extended through the control phase of the turn. They're not able to manage pressure vertically and set that edge, or they are not able to create more angulation to tilt the snowboard at a higher level, right? You could go either direction through those other tools we have: cause and effect, flex extension, how that's relating to the board performance, how that's relating to the turn outcome. We get a little bit of scarve through the control phase here. We get a little bit of scarve and initiation of the toe side right here. And both of those can be addressed through vertical pressure management and through setting the edge, getting a little bit more tilt through that combination of inclination and angulation. I want to pop back up. Lynn Hasday asked a question a little bit ago, which I want to regroup to now. So it seems like when we use the fundamentals as a lens, movement analysis becomes multiple choice test with real movements that help frame what the ideal movements are. When are we going to start using the fundamentals for cert candidates? I think it will help a lot to frame and clarify what people are seeing and doing. So the fundamentals are out there. They're published in the Teaching Snow Sports manual that came out 2 years ago. They're listed as examples of relationships between the body movements and the board performances, I think is how we worded it. Because what these came from, guys, this wasn't just the snowboard team. This was the National Task Force, which is a group of division and discipline leaders from all of our divisions and disciplines that get together and work on different task forces. So this was a representative from snowboard for each division. They got together to word these. And at the point that the Teaching Snow Sports manual came out, we were pretty confident about these 6 fundamentals. We'd been kind of brainstorming them, working on them in groups across the country for a while, but we weren't ready to kind of finalize them. So they went in that manual as examples of fundamental relationships, but they did officially get kind of named the snowboard fundamentals last summer. So it's the national team as well as this national task force of leaders from all over the country. And we've now published them a couple different places since then online. They will be in whatever the next version of the technical manual, whenever that comes out. But for now, they're the published places in the Snow Sports Teaching Manual, but they are on the website, and most of the divisions have them. These will start trickling into the exams. So the last year, the focus has been on the teaching skills fundamentals and the people skills fundamentals. I've done a couple webinars on those. Those are available. If you're not familiar with those yet, those are available. The recordings of those webinars are available. But now we have those fundamentals developed for all 3 zones: the teaching skills, the technical skills, and the people skills. And there's work now going into what the next version of our national standards will look like. I believe those are going to be approved during a summer meeting of the board, this probably June or July, at which point they are the new standards and we'll start working through them. Now, how that looks like in terms of adoption in the divisions, it's still a couple-year process, right? We're not just going to like pull out one exam process and replace it with another. What we're doing is working in these cross-division groups, starting with a level 1, to make the process a little bit more similar across the country. Now the exam's still going to look a little different everywhere, but we might be using the same assessment form to start from. We might start seeing a little bit more similar tasks and big pieces of the process. And a lot of that comes from things like these snowboard fundamentals. For next season, the 1920-21 season, we're still planning on using body movements and board performances in the Rocky Mountain division. Other divisions may decide to jump on the use of the fundamentals earlier. And a lot of that comes down to the size of divisions, right? Rocky Mountain has 6,000 members. Eastern has somewhere around 10,000 members. Western is, I think, 3,000 or 4,000 members. And some of the divisions are going to find it easier to adopt something like this. And to be honest, test it out a little bit for some of the bigger divisions to make those changes as well. So we can figure out some best practices and roll them out across the country. But I totally agree, Lynn. The 6 fundamentals work really well as kind of a multiple choice. Like I use them as a checklist. I go down that list. Like, is this the one I want to talk about? Nope. Is this one I want to talk about? Nope. Is this one I want to talk about? Yep, that one's got some areas we could talk about. What about this one? And I kind of work through there and boil it down to 1 or 2. They're going to help me make my case about what I want to work on the most clearly. And I do think we'll start seeing these trickle into the exam process over the next couple of years. Other questions, comments, things that you guys want to bring? We kind of schedule these for an hour and a half, so we've got time, kind of an hour presentation and another 30 minutes for comments and questions, or we can keep working through a couple more videos, but definitely open to questions, or if any of you want me to play a video and not talk, and you guys can brainstorm it out in the comments. Cool. All right, I will pull up another video here. Here we go. So I'm going to play this video a couple times. I do not have a video that shows really clear retraction. It's actually something we were just talking about on a Rocky Mountain Snowboard Committee meeting this morning. So these are all videos that we're going to be using in the RM division as the videos for movement analysis and the exams. We're making them available to all membership next fall, and maybe we'll see all the videos that are out there. And we were just going through videos that we shot this year and realized we really don't have any that clearly demonstrate retraction. So that's definitely on the list of things to gather, but I don't have one. Where would you apply it to writer that doesn't show the ability to do it? So retraction falls into in a couple of different pieces there: independent flex and extension, right? So moving the center mass to direct pressure along the length of the snowboard. We often see retraction start. Get the doll out again here. Start with that pulling of the front ankle, knee, and hip up towards the body. So we can talk a little bit about there. But really, retraction comes in any of those vertical movement patterns, most extended, most flexed, retraction, down and weighting, up and weighting, however you want to talk about those. Those come in controlling magnitude of pressure through board surface interaction. So that retraction really comes in through that third fundamental there. Yeah, Cody, this one's a little bit of a hot mess here. Something I think with MA, like we love to nerd out and tear videos apart, right? And look at where we can make changes to this rider. What if at the top of this run, this guy said to his instructor, forget all the lessons. I just want to shred this run. I just want to ride how I ride. Does that change how you would do what we'd say about MA? Cool. I like your guys' answer. So where I was going with that is yeah, Jay Hutchins. Yeah, good piece in here, and just something I like to throw in when we get into MA and tearing riders apart and looking at movement patterns. There's always stuff for us to work on, right? Any one of us. You go out with. We did a team ride day earlier this season, and the whole team went out and just critiqued each other, gave each other feedback, and just rode for fun sometimes, right? And that value there is this guy's snowboarding. He's having fun. He's got a smile on his face. You know, he's an intermediate rider. There's so many things for us to work on in this, and there's all sorts of stuff we can tear apart. But it starts from a point of he's on his snowboard, he's outside, he's having a good day, he's doing it right? And then from there we can work on making him a better snowboarder. But I do think it's important sometimes for us to take that step back out of snowboard nerd zone and like make it a fun run, or give him a soft focus, or you know, to ask him to focus on feelings, right? I really like that one, Brandon. What are the feelings in your boots when you transition heel to toe? Or what are you feeling in your body as you ride? Like, absolutely set up those free runs. Don't be afraid to give him soft focuses, but also start from a point where he's doing it right because he's having fun. He's on his snowboard and he's doing what he wants to do, and not get too hung up on how all the ways he's doing it wrong. Because there's a lot we can work on in this video. But I always like to throw that in when we work on MAs. Like, and everything starts with this guy starts from he's doing it right because he's snowboarding, not skiing, right? Or because he's having a good day, he's having fun, he's outside. And then how do we make it more effective, more efficient? So we've watched this video a few times here, and we want to prioritize some of these deficiencies. Looking through that checklist, looking through our multiple choice, what did you guys come up with? And you can just throw them in the chat. What are the easiest ways we can make some impacts on this riding? What are the fundamentals that you see as kind of the most important ones to focus on here?
Hey Chris, you hear me?
Yeah,
What I'd share is like I'd bring it back to a mellow groom green terrain, and then I have a drill where I have like their front hand goes onto their back shoulder, and then their back arm kind of goes behind their back to keep them from more in line. You know, to keep their upper body from wanting to rotate, keep their spine pretty in line with the board, and then just do open mellow carb turns. Let them just kind of get the edge work going on there.
cool. So what you're seeing is one of the primary issues here is that upper body rotary movement.
Right, like it's so open all the time, and kind of just kicking his back foot a lot, but still you're like really just relying on the upper body is so like out of the place, and he's working harder, like a lot more work he's got to do into it. Or if he like were to get his shoulder here and just be more aligned, and may focus more on staying in alignment and using more of the lower body to steer the board, or trust the edge to do the work.
Yeah, cool. Cody says controlling pivot through flex and extension rotation, moving center of mass along the length of the snowboard. Yep. So Chandler, to your point, putting those into these checklists of the fundamentals, and just based on what you said, I think you probably agree with Cody here. We want to work on the how he's controlling pivot through flex, extension, rotation, right? He's controlling it through that extension and flexion of that back hip and knee joint. So really pushing that back foot around the front foot. And he's doing that because all the way through this, as we look at it, he's out of reference alignment. His back, knee, and ankle and hip are more flexed than his front ankle, knee, and hip. So his center of mass is aft. He is not managing pressure along the length of the snowboard effectively. And because of that, he's not controlling pivot through flex, extension, and rotation effectively. So if we focus on getting Tony, yeah, focus on getting the body aligned, keep our center of mass more in the middle of the snowboard, try to get lined up and over the center of our snowboard. You know, even right here, dead on, you can see this hip, the shoulder is not in alignment with the terrain. The hips are not quite in alignment with the terrain. The knees are more so, but probably, again, not quite. This back knee is just a little bit more flexed than that front knee. You can look at how that gets worse at every joint until by the time we get to the shoulders, he's pretty far back over that back foot. And so, Chandler, I think your progression would be a good way to go, but breaking it down to the fundamentals in terms of what are the two fundamentals, or one or two or even three fundamentals are going to have our biggest area to work on. That checklist definitely points me to what Cody just said. Pivot through flexion rotation, center mass along the length of the snowboard. And then how do we do that? Well, we're going to get into some prescription for change, right? I want to focus on flexing that front knee more. I want to focus on, yeah, there we go, magnitude of pressure. Yep. So hard to unweight the snowboard because he doesn't use flex and extension 100%. So focusing on getting our center mass a little bit more forward by flexing that front knee and adding in some vertical movement to create that unweighting so we can flex and extend as we move through our turn. And all of that unlocks that ability for us to pivot the snowboard smoothly using our contact points, using the side cut of the snowboard, right? Instead of having to kick our back foot around. So the fundamentals, we can use that checklist, identify those three fundamentals as areas to work on, and then we move into how do we change the movement pattern within that fundamental. The fundamental doesn't say whether they're flexing, extending that back knee to kick the back foot around or using rotation of the front knee to pivot the snowboard. It just says that's how we do it, or that's the what the connection is, right? And then how we do it, that's where we start getting into that corrective and developmental opportunity. Nice, let's do one more here. I realize we're right at time, so if any of you guys have to drop off, we're all good. Making turns, rotary. You know what? That's pretty much the exact same video. We're gonna skip that one. Let me pull up. Watch this one. It's blue, ungroomed. Watch that one. I had one more in here. Go through black bumps. I knew I had one more in here. You want to take a stab at working through the checklist on this one? It's all good, Kelly. Cool. So we got 3 different routes here so far in chat. So torsional flex. Let's talk about that one to start with here. So we're on our heel side, and we want to go to our toe side. And actually, this goes right in line with Kelly's comment, right? Big up and weighting, brings it around to the toe side. No torsional flex, almost no torsional flex. There's a little bit here coming from the unweighting movement, but not from the steering movement. And same thing, toe to heel. Hey, this looks like a really stiff board for what we're getting out of conditions here. Yeah, hard to see that one, but it didn't look like a ton of, let's see, look at this one, toe to heel. Yeah, yeah. So very, very simultaneous movement around. So when we talk about twist, we're often talking about that sequential movement, right? One toe drops first or one heel drops first to initiate that turn. So if we wanted to work with the concept of torsional flex here, focusing on the how, creating that sequential movement, leading with that front knee, right? And that's what we're seeing there is not a lot of front knee steering, which results in not having much in the way of torsional flex to start the turn here. So that's certainly a direction we could go. And that lines up with what Kelly was saying about that vertical unweighting movement, right? Like big up and over, comes up real tall to get the snowboard light so they can rotate directly underneath them. So we've got control, magnitude of pressure created through board surface interaction as an element there. And then how we do that, well, we're doing it with up and weighting right now. Maybe we want to move towards a down and weighting movement, a most flexed movement pattern. Looks like late getting onto the toe side. He's staying 4 on the board and not finishing on his back foot. Yep. So this one gets, we're seeing a little bit of that managing pressure along the length of the snowboard, right? So we're a little bit aft here and then picking up the back foot and pivoting. So we're not necessarily staying centered on the snowboard. Coming through. Yeah, big vertical movement and pressure way around the nose. Full like nose press, heel to toe here. Brandon, they are referenced in the Snow Sports Teaching Manual that was published in October, November of 2018. And they've been in 32 degrees a couple of times. We're actually, the team's working on an article for the website for the summer, just a kind of update on the fundamentals. And then, yeah, we've had them out in a couple publications. They were really first published as the fundamentals during Interski last spring at Ushuaia, or at Bulgaria, and then they were formally adopted last summer, and we've started using them in a few things since then. Could get lower for more range of motion, pivot through rotation instead of throwing upper body to initiate turns, using more of the lower body or even anticipatory movement to get the pivot to the board. Yes. And could get lower for more range of motion, more fore aft management. Don't let the backhand touch the ground. Lifting the nose up the back foot around the bumps, relying on nose pivot points. Yep. So you guys are all seeing all of these different elements, right? Again, there's no right answer, but looking through different ways where we might want to use like some low-hanging fruit, right? Going through these fundamentals. Torsional flex makes a checklist. That's one we could work on. Managing pivot, how we want to manage pivot could be one, right? So hopefully this is making sense, and I'll wrap up here just in the interest of time. The fundamentals as a tool for movement analysis don't explain the how. They explain the what, right? You go through that checklist and it helps you identify these 1 or 2 points in the fundamentals that you're going to use to make recommendations or changes in this rider. And then how you do that, that's where you dive into those body movements and the board performances as they've always existed and look at how do we want to change that? Is it going through a movement pattern to create some twist? Is it going through a movement pattern to create retraction or most flexed or down a weighted movement pattern? Is it a pivot point? Are they too far forward, too far aft, right? the fundamentals help you narrow your focus, and you go from there into how are you going to make those changes. That's doing what we've always done and building from those skill sets. Hopefully this makes sense. Again, this is something that you know, we've been playing with on the team for the last 2 or 3 years, and on the national task forces. They take a little bit of time to wrap your head around. It's a different verbiage. We're not expecting anyone to use them word for word. They are there to be turned into more of a vernacular that we're going to use. You know, that public, if you're in an exam with me a couple of years down the road and you say, riders moving pressure along the length of the snowboard, that means the same thing as directing or controlling the relationship of the center mass to the base of support to direct pressure along the length of the snowboard, right? I don't expect anyone to say that. It's there in that writing to match up with the other disciplines fundamentals. And again, the more we start using them like this, the more familiar they're going to be, the more comfortable you'll get with them. And I've found using them for movement analysis like this is a really good way to start to get comfortable with how they interrelate, how they move from the what into the how, and kind of what the fundamentals are and what they're not. It's been helpful for me as I've gotten used to them. So hopefully this was helpful. We will do more of these for sure. And the last thing I'll say is we are doing a kind of national digital rider rally conversations. We've started doing them every Saturday. It's a little happy hour. You know, rider rally is this event that we do every year alongside National Academy. That's kind of a rider centric get out and snowboard, and we wanted to kind of keep that stoke alive. So no tech talk, no focus, crack a beer or a beverage or you know, or a glass of water, whatever you're into, and just hang out with people and catch up and chat. So those are Saturdays at 5 p.m. There's a Facebook group for AASI Rider Rally. Feel free to reach out to me if you want details for that, if you're not a part of that. And then last thing I always like to do here is just share my email address and social profile. If you have follow-up questions you want to ask, any kind of questions, comments, things that you want more information about, I've got lots of time in my hands right now, so I'm happy to chat. And it's Chris at livewinter, livewntr.com is my email address. And then all things social media is at Chris Rogers Vail. And yeah, happy to chat, connect, share stories, all that good stuff. Thank you guys for being here. Hopefully I answered more questions than I created. And if I created too many questions, please ask them offline.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Good talking to you.
Sweet. Cheers, Chandler.
Thanks, Chris.
No worries. Thanks for being here, Lynn.